Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, Emily Sophia, aka Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you in as grisly of detail as possible the first season of Penny Dreadful. I finally started watching the show. It is on Netflix in its entirety, so I encourage you, if you're checking out this video and you haven't seen the show, go check it out over yonder or on whatever other service you might find it. The beginning of this review is going to be relatively spoiler-free, just kind of capturing my thoughts and impressions of the show. And then I'll get into some spoilery details. So that's the way this is going to go. I have a lot of ground to cover and I have a hefty script before me, so I apologize if I'm not making eye contact the whole time, but this would be impossible without this. So here we go. Without further ado. So, the number 3 usually carries connotations of holiness, completion, or unity, right? It conjures up the idea of sacred trinities that serve as the cornerstones of many religions, for instance. It's a very powerful numerical figure. It also just so happens to be the total number of seasons bestowed upon 2 of the best horror series on television, those being NBC's painfully short-lived yet transcendent Hannibal, which I will never cease talking about, and Showtime's macabre and fantastical Penny Dreadful. Named after the cheap, serialized literature that rose to popularity in 19th century Victorian England and offered sensationalistic or supernatural escapism for a largely working-class readership, Penny Dreadful is Gothic horror that bursts at the seams with spiritual upheaval, supernatural terror, and monstrous mischief. It's perfect. It thrusts us headlong into the London of the late 1800s that would have existed were the accounts of Bram Stoker, Mary Shelley, Oscar Wilde, Robert Louis Stevenson, Wilkie Collins, and other legendary wordsmiths completely factual. But who am I to draw the distinctions between truth and fiction and life or death? The shadowy children of romanticism and denizens of the demi-monde that we follow in Penny Dreadful are definitely unconcerned with those barriers. Their pursuits take them to worlds in between, beneath, and beyond our own that teem with beasts, bloodsuckers, deities, and demons, especially the ones hell-bent on having their way with the mortal world. Our protagonists are not only magnets for this kind of action, as it turns out. Some of them aren't even humans in the strictest sense of the word. They are a motley crew of outsiders and mischief makers, plagued and elevated by their passions, struggles, and intimate dealings with the preternatural. So Penny Dreadful besieges us with all things grotesque, abhorrent, alluring, and utterly strange. Evidently, stranger things are just as likely to surface and wreak havoc in late 19th century London as they are in the American Midwest of the late 20th century. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, got my Stranger Things reference in. The first season's 8-episode run is foaming at the mouth with ancient evils, lurking entities, primordial gods, seductive demons, animate corpses, bloodthirsty vampires, and a whole smorgasbord of other creatures dwelling in the flesh or behind ethereal doors. Our protagonists are all well acquainted with one form of mythological being or another. They're all cut from the cloth of trauma, loss, death, and otherness, too. Qualities which inevitably bind them together to endeavor the valiant rescue of Mina Murray from the clutches of evil. Now, evil, as it exists in Penny Dreadful, is a very complex and labyrinthine web of possessing spirits that are at war either with or against one another as they bait, entice, and exploit members of the human race, transforming them into the vessels in which they can catalyze their perverse schemes for world dominance. The curious outfit comprised of the disturbed and enigmatic Vanessa Ives, the grimly determined and personally compromised Sir Malcolm Murray, the audacious and gung-ho Ethan Chandler, and the philosophizing and scientifically industrious Victor Frankenstein tread unflinchingly into ghastly darkness of folkloric and occultic proportions, bringing grand ambitions, checkered pasts, and larger-than-life secrets with them. What more could one ask for? So many of the characters in Penny Dreadful are adapted from iconic novels like The Picture of Dorian Gray, Frankenstein, and Dracula. And while audiences have been more or less inundated with film and television adaptations of these literary milestones, I think that Penny Dreadful brings these characters together in a way that feels genuinely fresh and exhilarating, if not delightfully pulpy and campy. It is top shelf schmaltz, okay? It is stronger and trippier than Dorian Gray's absinthe, and I love it. Thus far, the show has drawn most heavily from the lore of Dracula, and I do suspect that we've yet to meet the infamous Lord of the Damned himself. I think that's still coming at this point. I haven't seen any of the other seasons, by the way. So Mina Murray, daughter of Sir Malcolm Murray and childhood friend of Vanessa Ives, she is definitely ripped right out of Stoker's tale. In the novel, she is one of Count Dracula's prime targets and, interestingly enough, outlives the curse of Dracula's bite to wed a man named Jonathan Harker, who is just briefly mentioned as Mina's latest suitor in the show. Kind of a fun little Easter egg there. The Dracula parallels don't end there, however, and I could be reading a bit far into things, especially given the fact that I haven't seen the newest and final seasons. But I find the similarities between Vanessa Ives and Lucy Westenra, who's Mina's best friend in the novel, to be kind of compelling. The show actually seems to kind of conflate and reverse the characters of Lucy and Mina, as Lucy is the one who is consumed by vampirism rather than Mina. And Vanessa actually makes it out. Well, yeah, we're getting into spoilers. I don't know if I provided an adequate warning, but yeah, spoilers. Here we go. Go away if you haven't seen more. But anyway, so consider the fact too that Vanessa's monster hunting company includes a man of wealth and nobility, Malcolm, an American cowboy, Ethan, and a doctor, Victor Frankenstein, whose occupations mirror those of Lucy's suitors in the novel, who are respectively Arthur Holmwood, Quincy Morris, and John Seward. This is just food for the thought banquet, of course. Penny Dreadful contains a cornucopia of allusions to the fiction of the era, and I, red-blooded English lit major that I am, wouldn't have it any other way. Let's also linger on Penny Dreadful's dealings with Dorian Gray, the titular hedonist of Oscar Wilde's scandalous novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. While some viewers were perhaps disappointed that the show hasn't yet forayed into Dorian's most illicit and unsavory deeds, all we know so far is that he likes it rough in bed, has a taste for blood, owns a portrait or 2,000, frequents gory little underground gambling dens, throws orgies, and likes to stop and smell the nightshades every so often. All that to say, it is heavily implied that we will finally get to take a peek at his ghoulish painting soon. And if you don't know the original story from the novel, just know that he is a duplicitous creature bound for self-destruction. At least I assume. But aren't we all? At this point in the story, Dorian Gray serves as an opportunity for characters like Ethan and Vanessa to explore who they are, who they pretend to be, and who they wish to be. He also exposes what they're capable of by intentionally or unintentionally tapping into their traumas and violent delights, arguably for his own gratification. He is a reckless medium who gets off on conjuring up intense experiences. His human mask is one of this innocence that's bred from like a sociopathic mask of guilt. At least that's my impression. For his most significant contribution to the main story, he awakens Vanessa's inner demon, instigating a series of truly harrowing events that actually end up binding our kaleidoscopic crew of misfits together despite the forces that threaten to rip them apart. Vanessa ultimately rejects Dorian in an attempt to keep her inner madness at bay, but he doesn't strike me as the type to respect others' wishes. Restraint is not in his wheelhouse, and he'll no doubt come knocking on hell's door again in no time. Victor Frankenstein, on the other hand, cannot restrain himself from trying to bridge the seemingly irreversible tie between life and death, thereby transcending the latter entirely. His story was one of my favorite aspects of the season, honestly, and my familiarity with the source material made me all the more excited to watch how Penny Dreadful subverted my expectations at every turn. When the first episode ended with Victor bringing Proteus to life, I was stunned at how sweet and poignant and emotional the initial meeting between man and creator was. It was this pure, unadulterated moment of wonderment for both parties. Victor quickly assumed the part of the doting dad, instructing his bright-eyed newborn in the ways of the world. Their first father-son outing on the streets of London was nothing short of magical. Proteus quickly developed an affection for the fairy lights too, which was just the cherry on top of the birthday cake that was this whole endeavor. And then when Proteus started to remember his former life, we thought, oh, okay, so this is going to be the source of Victor's struggle. He has to try to acclimate his new creation to society and reshape this once deceased man's identity. Oh, see, this is what I was thinking, right? But alas, how blissfully naive I was. As soon as I was willing to accept that Proteus was the Adam of his race, Caliban, or the other creature, who I will call Caliban, burst onto the scene and directly through Proteus's chest cavity. It was a sickening, devastating moment that put a classic story into brutal new perspective in a way I did not see coming. Although Caliban was somewhat sidelined after we came up to speed on his horrifying story of birth, abandonment, and abuse, and then learned of his Phantom of the Opera-esque employment at the theater, the fact that he and Victor reached an accord by the end of the season, even after he snapped the neck of mother freaking Van Helsing exposition himself, he was pretty much just there to talk about vampires, let's be real. But all that was really touching and unexpected. Victor and Caliban's camaraderie is sure to suffer a few more storms, but who knows, maybe they'll come out as allies instead of nemesis. Although I can't imagine that Ethan would be too pleased to see Brona back in action and shacking up with an undead gentleman. That's assuming that she decides to assume the role of Eve anyway. Victor may have the power to create, but he possesses neither the ability to control the end result, nor keep his emotions in check when things go awry. You know, it's those poetic caprices, if you will. All in all, Victor emerged as a really multifaceted character who we can both root for and remain wary of in the days to come. He's flawed but sympathetic and constantly walks the fine line between madman and miracle worker. I am also quite impressed with the journey of Ethan Chandler, whose presence perplexed me for a while, but nonetheless produced plenty of entertainment and intrigue. I think it's safe to say that it took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to put my finger on his inner werewolf, okay? In hindsight, I can appreciate the show's numerous and not so subtle attempts to nudge me toward that conclusion long before he jumped the two bounty hunters under a full moon. All the signs were there, from the way the village woman gawked at him after remarking on the seeming return of Jack Ripper, to the way he pacified the wolves at the London Zoo, to the absinthe-fueled visions of bloodshed and gore that definitely fit the MO of a crazed beast. The finale's grand reveal should not have registered as quite the shock that it did for me, but hey, I will cut myself some slack. Thank you very much. I liked how, just for a couple cool moments, how Ethan and Victor's bickering and rivalry subsided with a friendly shooting lesson, and how he proved himself more effective than an ordained priest when it came to silencing Vanessa's ravenous demon. Ethan, too, shed the stereotypical cowboy facade and gradually took on new dimensions of both tenderness and ruthlessness, both sides of the spectrum, through his relationship with Brona and his dealings with the double threat of extradition and mythological mayhem. So now that the wolf's out of the bag at last, I do suspect that we're going to find a lot more fun and frenzy with Mr. Chandler in the upcoming season. He's a humorous and sharp-witted stud whose howl is every bit as bad as his bite, and I dig it quite a bit. All of this brings me to the incomparable Vanessa Ives, who is brought to radiant life by the mesmerizing and uber-talented Eva Green. Honestly, the reason I decided to watch this series in the first place was because I could not escape the praises for her performance in this show. Everything involving Vanessa exceeded the hype by leaps and bounds. I could not believe how flawlessly she was able to careen back and forth between this clever, poised, dynamic woman fighting for her soul and this reincarnated goddess of evil / mouthpiece for Beelzebub / conduit of vindictive spirits. She was a little bit of everything in one. And yeah, Vesa is clearly the reigning star of the show, and her combination of inherent charisma and unearthly power bring together an ensemble of colorful characters who become a tour de force in the face of demonic malice. And it is so cool to watch just how everybody forms up on her. Words cannot express how exhilarating it was to get 2 full episodes dedicated to her past and present as well, namely Closer Than Sisters and Possession. And those were 2 of my favorite episodes. I think Seance was another favorite of mine too, especially in terms of Vanessa performances. But she is this character who manages to be as definitive and well-formed as she is fluid and transformational, which kind of comes with the territory of sharing your mind with the author of darkness. It happens. But man, yeah, I can't find the words that do justice to the brilliance and complexity and horror of her character. And now that she and Malcolm have laid Mina to rest, I'm ecstatic to see where Vanessa goes next. I mean, even on the brink of death, she refuses to cave to her demonic possessors. And despite the tumultuous relationship with sensuality, sexuality, and love that she has developed, she's consistently feeling out and measuring up her surroundings with this arresting intelligence and intuitiveness. I will gladly follow her into the deepest dark, come whatever may. So I've said just about all that I can without talking my own ears off, as much as I want to gush over the cinematography, score, and other integral pieces of the show's breathtaking storytelling. And I know that there's so much more worth analyzing, and this was a very character-centric review, as I am wont to do, but I would like to leave you with a few of my favorite quotes from the first season before I plunge into the next. And I'd like to let you know that I will be reviewing at least the second season. I'm afraid of the third season because of what I've heard about it, but I might actually be focusing more on cinematography and some of those sorts of elements in that second review, so I like to conclude, of course, with the quotes. So, here goes. Life and death, Sir Malcolm. That flicker that separates one from the other, fast as a bat's wing, more beautiful than any sonnet. That is my river, that is my mountain. There, I will plant my flag. Man does not live only in the empirical world. He must seek the ephemeral, or why live? We here have been brutalized by loss. It has made us brutal in return. I would put mirrors behind the entire world if I could. I have a complicated history with the Almighty. Forever hiding your face in the guile of others. Are you afraid? Always. And that's the conversation between Vanessa and the demon emulation of Ethan, which was a pretty cool moment, I gotta say. So a couple more. We all owe each other in the end. I would rather be the corpse I was than the man I am. And do you really want to be normal? So that's my breakdown of the first season of Penny Dreadful. I'll be back with the next season and a whole smattering of other shows on my lineup. It has taken me a very long time to get back into my reviewing groove, but gotta pop the cherry sometime, so this is it. Hope y'all enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts and reactions down in the comments. Please alert me to spoilers as well, because I haven't seen the second season yet. But you're all wonderful and amazing. And as always, I'll be back before you know it.